Yeah, even though there's a lot of newcomers coming in, this is still Dylan Andrews' team.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the app, create an account. You can get $20 off your first purchase by using the code LOCKEDONCollege. Terms apply. Where we get started for this episode is, all right, we've taken a dive into potential starting lineups for UCLA. Which of the transfers will have the most immediate impact right away from Mick Cronin's bunch? But large in part, despite the 8 newcomers, 6 transfers, 2 signed freshmen, and if we can't forget, the preferred walk-on, so technically 8 with the 9th in the foray there, you've got a lot of players mixing into time, scholarships, overdoing scholarships, preferred walk-ons. Who is going to be the said leader of this team? Well, the on-court leader of sorts was Lazar Stefanovic last year. You're bringing in the USC team captain in Kobe Johnson, who I said will have the biggest impact this year defensively, just that rah-rah ability on the court to score, rebound, most importantly defend. But I still say this is Dylan Andrews' team. What does that mean? Well, Dylan Andrews has to take his scoring level to the next level. In the early stages of the 23-24 season, a lot of the scoring at the end of the year, banged up, going through the freshman wall as well. You had a Dembona. You would have never thought that by the season's end, this leading scorer for last year's team was none other than Dylan Andrews. It took a strong scoring stretch, a strong three-point shooting stretch for him to leapfrog those 2 players, a top-tier freshman recruit, now an NBA draftee. And here we are with Andrews as the leading returning scorer, about 4 or 5 players coming into this year's team who average more points than him on other rosters, but the ball is going to be in the hands mostly brought up the court by Dylan Andrews. Regardless of who's the number 2, who's coming as the backup, the ball will be in Dylan's hands so much. So what does that mean? Well, Dylan Andrews, in his best scoring stretches, where UCLA had a lot of success, specifically in the middle of January to early February, where the Bruins were left for dead, then all of a sudden made an outside run at a bubble consideration, right? Not even, they sniffed a bubble consideration for a little bit there before that Utah debacle at the buzzer. UCLA saw Dylan Andrews during a strong scoring stretch after he started the year, I believe, 5 of his first 6 games with less than 10 points scoring. Single-digit outputs in 5 of his first 6 games of the season. Of course, he had the big game winner against UC Riverside when Cronin was out going coast to coast with the layup. But for Dylan Andrews, it was his midseason and late season surge that brought him well above the scoring averages that he had his freshman year. He's only a 7.5 point per game's career scorer at UCLA. Ended up scoring about 12.5 points this game, close to 13. And there was a stretch where from the USC game on the road, where he scored 20 to beat the Trojans in the Galen Center, until UCLA played USC again at home in Pauley Pavilion, the 6 games, the at USC game and the game where they lost at home to Utah, he averaged about 16 points per game, where he scored 20 points at USC, 18, 21 in strong games against Oregon State and Oregon, 13 and 12 on the road in the Bay Area, but still solid, 13 in a strong win against Colorado, and then 15 in a heartbreaking loss to Utah. All strong scoring games when you combine the fact that prior to that 16-point per game average, this was a kid that came in with 6 of his previous 7 games, he hadn't reached 10 points. And in that one game where he did reach 10 points, he reached 10 points exactly in a loss to Cal, when we thought the season was an embarrassment at that time early on in Pac-12 play. But Dylan Andrews found a way to not turn over as much, improve his three-point stroke, and while he was scoring a lot then, it wasn't a lot of three-point shooting. It was just him getting to the bucket, finding ways to score, finding hidden chunks to get to the free throw line, and UCLA saw a lot of success. If you parallel this to what the recent Cronin teams have had, one, depth scoring. 3 to 4, maybe 5 guys averaging 11, 12, 13 points per game, a fifth like UCLA had when they won the Pac-12 with David Singleton, when he averaged nearly 10 points per game as an elite three-point shooter. You had 4, maybe 5 scorers on the Final Four team. You had depth scoring. And technically, UCLA on this team last year had 4 options who averaged double figures or more, but there's time Mac was laying goose eggs, Stefanovic was cold, Bono was in foul trouble, and Andrews couldn't always score, as highlighted by some of his struggles to start the year, a midseason struggle to find the ball in the basket. So it wasn't a consistent depth scoring option, and those 4 options still combined didn't even average 50 points per game. Even though they all averaged 10 or more, they couldn't even average 50 points per game, and none of it was consistent. But even though they had those semi-depth options, Cronin went to the portal, went to the late stage recruiting, go get Trent Perry, and even though Freeney's going to have his name in the mix, you got a lot of scoring options to add on to the depth, a lot of it needing to be shooting. So UCLA will have more depth scoring options, but in those teams that made the Sweet 16 and Final Four, those 3 straight years under Mick Cronin, in his first 3 years coaching UCLA when the tournament was able to be played due to COVID, you had a scoring guard or a scoring leader like Johnny Juzang, who averaged close to 16 points per game, 15.5 points per game, or Jaquez, who averaged close to 18 points per game in his senior campaign as the Pac-12 Player of the Year. What did UCLA not have this year? It was a guy who averaged 16 points per game. Dylan Andrews couldn't even crack 13 points per game. And that's no fault of his own. That was nobody on this UCLA roster. And that was Andrews as the leading scorer, surging at the end of the year. And let's remind you of the strong 6-game surge that Andrews had at the end of the year. Against Washington, and while this didn't always produce the most wins and losses, you had 21-21 against the Washington schools on the road, 18 in a loss against Arizona, where the Bruins were run out of their home gym, ASU, where he scored 12 on a senior day, and then Oregon State put in 31 points, a career performance, and hit 7 of 9 trays as the Bruins held off the Beavers. Against Oregon, 24 points, close to nailing a last-second buzzer beater to send the game to overtime. Still, he had a stronger shooting performance, even though he didn't hit from 3 that day. In large in part for Dylan Andrews, that last 6-game stretch, if I'm doing my math correctly, did about a 20-point-per-game average. Now, 16 points per game, I think reasonable. But we've seen the explosion and the emergence of Andrews in short spurts. And if he can do that for a season long, average 16 points per game, doesn't need to be 20 points per game. I don't think any UCLA Bruin is going to be able to score 20 points per game on average or close to it with the amount of times and the amount of shots that'll be taken by everybody distributed around. And for Andrews, a large part of his success also came with the assist-to-turnover ratio improving, his ability to play defense, run the offense, but also find his own. I was reading some of his old scouting reports when he committed. Before Abramo Zonka committed to UCLA, Andrews was the lowest rated recruit in that 22 class that included Amari Bailey, NBA draftee. You had Adembona, NBA draftee, both 5 stars, and the lo and behold 4-star Dylan Andrews, who I'm reading this 24/7 sports write-up, has a great horizontal game, can drive, get a mid-range. What is Andrews good at? Mid-range jump shots, floating, can finish with either hand. We found Andrews with the ability to go coast to coast late in games, finish with either hands. And it says in this old school write-up, 6'3" guard, great horizontal athlete, isn't a high riser, finishes efficiently with either hand, quality 3-point shooter with an economical release. What does that mean? He can do it again and again. And while he didn't show that his freshman year, remember, bigger gap between high school to college three-point line, grew into that role, got more shots his sophomore year, and can finish difficult shots with either hand and has a feel for scoring in the lane, can get to his spots. These are all things about Dylan Andrews that write-up talked about. He could simply be an NBA player, from Jerry Meyer writing that in January of 22. And all those things have come out to be true and very strong parts of Dylan Andrews' game. So the big thing for UCLA that they need this next year, the shooting, rebounding, consistent defending between all 5 players on the court at a given time, but they need that leader on the court. And while it can be more of a vocal leadership between Stefanovic and Kobe Johnson, I would expect with him coming over, you just get those guys who are natural leaders. Not that Dylan Andrews is not, but you need someone to step it up scoring-wise and be that consistent guy that can get you 16 to 17. There's going to be 4 or 5 guys who will average 10 or more, I believe, on this team, and maybe a 6 that averages 9 for what should be a higher scoring lineup for UCLA this year. But you do need someone to lead the charge, and that's where Andrews has to take the team, take the leadership, and score the basketball. We've seen him shoot the ball. We've seen him drive, seen him get to the line and make free throws more consistently this year. Shooting improved despite more volume of shots. Maybe it doesn't show in the percentages, but when he got the opportunity, when the moments were tighter, he proved it on certain stages. And now UCLA, you see they get depth scoring, and under a Mick Cronin coached team, depth scoring and a 16-point per game, 17-point per game score, that team does not get beat because they play such good defense that they can outscore you, and on most nights will just simply out-defend you. And this is where I think Dylan Andrews, as the junior, can come in with all those things from a scouting report when he committed to what he's shown from year 1 to year 2, heading into year 3, will certainly be a leading scoring candidate for UCLA for a second straight year and should be. Now, Mac's going to have something to say about that. A lot of other players will have things to say about it. But Mick Cronin got the depth. Now, I think it's Andrews to insert himself and assert himself as the MVP of this team. I know Johnson might have that biggest impact, as I said, but there needs to be that leader, and that's what Andrews can be. What can the new UCLA commit be for Deshaun Foster? Got a 4th of July commit. Who is it, and how is he related to previous UCLA commits? How are they intertwined? We'll talk about that next on Locked On UCLA. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. If you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered with over 120 million plus parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for because with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want, easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that dub. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Cruising on here in the second segment for Locked On UCLA. Zach with y'all. What are we talking about when it comes to the relationship that the recent UCLA commit has gotten? A 4th of July commit for the Bruins in 2024. Where is this going to help UCLA going forward? Well, we're going to talk a little bit more football that wrap up this show, the next 2 segments, but the Bruins got a 6'4" receiver commit. That's Jace Brown out of Warren, who comes in as a kid that can certainly be an impact receiver in a year. When you get it, you see 6'4", 6'5", you see receiver coaches just going crazy. Like, oh my goodness, got a big body to throw in the end zone. Someone who could come down with big possession receivers. And remember, J-Michael Sturdivant, he's not 6'4", 6'5". He's coming in, and you're going to get somebody who can replace J-Michael Sturdivant potentially as a lead receiver for UCLA. Remember, J-Michael Sturdivant 6'3", so you're getting a big-bodied receiver, bigger than what UCLA's best and arguably deepest weapon is for the current offense in J-Michael. And then you've got Logan Loya, who wants to play a role. There's a lot of receivers in that room that are going to be vying for time. And Jace Brown comes in, and what is his role? How does he connect to a current UCLA commit? Well, one, he's a local kid. An emphasis in this recruiting class, in this just string of commits from local guys. When the class of 24 only had 4 local products, Deshaun Foster has emphasized in his first full recruiting cycle, there's guys in Los Angeles, there's guys in the greater LA area that you can get that are talented guys. And this is what I believe to be a 3-star commit. If you go based on 24/7 Sports or on 3, they all have different things. And he's a guy that plays high school ball with Madden Iamaleava. Yes, I did not butcher it that time. I've only listened to his brother say his own name so many times. Iamaleava. How old teammates? You're telling me they're going to go with a running mate with a star high school quarterback who is your top recruit, and you're going to go get his receiver? That's boom. That's huge. Even if Madden doesn't pan out to be the UCLA quarterback or doesn't stay that long, that's huge, at least for building relationships in the room, bringing guys in and staying connected. Now, it's not your bringing in your Bosco kids or your modern day kids, but hey, the local public school, that's going to be a lot of fun if you're going to go watch some high school ball in Southern California in the fall of 24, and hopefully running mates for UCLA in 25 and beyond, deep into their Big Ten careers at UCLA. Still very weird to say, but Jace Brown comes in, a guy who had offers all the way across the board, some Big 12, Big 10 rivals, some of them former Pac-12 rivals between Arizona, Kansas, Minnesota, and Utah. But what UCLA's been able to do, and what I emphasized in the last podcast, talking about what was written in the LA Times by Ben Bolch, when kids come and take their official visits to UCLA, heck, even their unofficial visits, they're going to lean towards UCLA by the time the day is over. They are leaning that way to UCLA. I'm going to go to Westwood. That's how it should be. If you go into an official visit, unless the kid's just dead set on a school and he's just wasting your time, every time a kid comes to an official visit, you need to, for lack of a better term, cloud his judgment in terms of where he's going to go. Not in a bad way, but in a sense of, hey, I thought I was going here, but now UCLA looks like a great school. Obviously, they are number one public university. Football school, still trying to prove that to the mass part of the nation, but absolutely UCLA football school, Rose Bowl, iconic scenery, everything, support, fan base, everything. And now UCLA is showing that they're interested in kids, getting the kids, so now they can pair high school teammates together locally, so families don't have to go far. They can go to the Rose Bowl. They can stay, watch a bunch of games, and the road trips can be fun road trips in Big Ten play. And now you've got guys who are building in their high school locker rooms relationships that are already going to develop them deeper into the college level. And even if Madden and Jace Brown don't continue their careers long time UCLA Bruin, the numbers, I'm just kind of making up numbers right now, but numbers don't lie that they're probably not going to, high school kids aren't going to stay at their current university that they've committed to all 3 to 4 years, whether it's a decommit, a change, whatever it is. That's still a good get for UCLA as a 3-star kid. This is someone who, one big thing is a big pass catcher, developing physically. So that's why he's still a 3-star guy, as written by Blair for 7 Sports. So he's still developing. So remember, they're buying low and getting a higher ceiling. They're finding someone who can come in locally and is really good and can turn into something spectacular, hopefully. And the big draw is his relationship in high school with Madden. Now, I'm not saying they're the best of friends. Don't really know that. But you get commits who are playing together in high school, they could probably ball out in the Rose Bowl as well. You got your top commit, arguably one of his top receiving options in high school. You bring them together, a growing receiver into his own body, physically maturing over the next year. You're going to get a UCLA class that still already has a lot of receivers, so they don't need to sell out for skill position guys in this year. They got a big running back coming in with the commit. They got a big-time receiver now, and UCLA is filling out the offensive side of things. Offensive linemen, skill positions, and now the big thing for UCLA is to continue to build the secondary, which will possibly be a big struggle, as read about with another article that rates UCLA secondary as one of the worst in the Big Ten this year. What does that mean? We'll talk about it next on Locked On UCLA. Let me tell you why Gametime is the place to go if you want some Major League Baseball tickets. It's an official authorized ticket marketplace. They make tickets, getting them faster, easier, and the prices actually go down closer to first pitch. And for me, I like to do a lot of games during the summer, whether it's baseball games. Maybe you wanted to go see some El Trafico on the 4th of July and you couldn't sneak into the Rose Bowl. Maybe because you were looking in the wrong spots. Maybe because you're like, fees, ew, disgusting. I don't like that. Well, with Gametime, they show you with all-in pricing a feature that shows the total up front. No surprise fees at checkout. So you go and you're looking at these prices, you're like, man, that's a deal, because they save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets. We know as we do that as Angelinos in sports, concerts, comedy, you're going to be there 15 minutes late. Why not get a deal on that ticket too and know what you're paying instead of paying an extra $50 in fees that you didn't know about? You get your deal, you know what you're paying, and you can make your decision. Let's head out and go sit in some traffic because we're going to enjoy the rest of our night with these amazing tickets we got. Because you can see where you're sitting with the seat views, panoramic views. So download the Gametime app. You can take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets or more with Gametime. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest priced, guaranteed. All right, cruising on. Final segment here with Locked On UCLA. Is it a scary sign? Isn't that good that the Bruins are currently rated as having the worst secondary currently in the Big Ten for this upcoming season? Is that why UCLA is now getting a lot of love in the wins and losses department? Yes, a new defensive coordinator, 2 guys transfer out to go follow him. You got talent leaving, and you technically only have 1 returning starter. Now, you can go back and forth with the Jalen Davies, Kirkwood debate. You got a lot of experience, got a lot of older guys who haven't played together. So I think it's a little rough to say that UCLA is got the worst secondary in the Big Ten, considering there's 18 teams. Think about that. 18 teams. And UCLA, according to a 24/7 Sports rating, this very week that the podcast was recorded, UCLA has the worst secondary in the conference. Now, let's remember, this is what UCLA's got. Addison, Davies, Ramon Henderson, Kirkwood, Kalen Moore, KJ Wallace. Guys who have played in a lot of plug-and-plays. And probably forgetting to name a couple in there too. But you've got guys who, remember, you still got some freshmen coming in like Christian Dunbar-Hawkins and more. I'm not sure how many of these guys will make impacts right away compared to veteran players who understand the physicality it might take to play in the Big Ten and learn a new system under Kaika Malloy. I'm not sure how much he's going to tweak. You know, they could say things in the offseason, but we'll see what the new defensive coordinator tweaks compared to Danton Lynn's philosophy. UCLA, a little deeper, but a lot of inexperience playing together. And what's the biggest thing when you're playing in a loud stadium on the road? Communication. Yes, they might be silence when you're playing a game, right? And the offense is on the field for the opposition, but you need communication and a mixture between youth and Davies just earning a starting spot, Kirkwood going in and out of the lineup. You've got a lot of guys who are changing schools, changing scenery as UCLA is. So how can UCLA do in this Big Ten? Well, remember, they're fighting behind a lot of changed head coaches. So a lot of these teams that have depleted secondaries have completely different head coaches from one year to the next. And remember, USC's amazing defense, sarcasm implied, even with bringing in a couple of UCLA kids from the secondary and John Humphrey and Kamari Ramsey, is still rated in the bottom half of secondaries in this conference. They're currently, based on this ranking sheet, number 10. Number 10. And good Lord, you know, if they still had their defensive coordinator, they would be 18 and UCLA would be 17. That's just how it works. So even with all the talent they can recruit and get, still in the bottom half with those 2 guys. But you can see the difference between losing a Humphrey, a defensive coordinator, losing the likes of Kamari Ramsey, who is very talented in his year at UCLA. That's the difference. But I do think, and I hope the experience brought in between the transfers coming over from Notre Dame, from Oregon, from Georgia Tech, like the Hendersons, the Addisons, and the Wallaces of the world, can help bring some stability. Kirkwood can take a leap forward. Same thing for Davies. And then maybe some youth can come in and make a big impact. Remember, Brian Addison's like 25, 26, 27. That's an older college player, especially for college football. And I know sometimes you get those military veterans who come in and play college football, but for a straight college kid, in terms of coming from high school all the way to playing college ball with injuries, COVID, the extra year granted, and redshirting, playing 4 games, that's an older player. That's older than some NFL defensive backs and safeties right now. That's longer than some people have careers in the NFL. So you've got guys who have played around the block on this UCLA team. And according to this, a lot of depth, but young and experienced. I'm not sure that equals 18 with what's been changed. And remember, Akaka Malloy has already been a defensive coordinator. It's not like he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just taken over from a unit that was really good, thrived on a big-time pass rush, and while the secondary played fairly well than in previous years under Chip Kelly, this is a team now for Deshaun Foster isn't going to be able to rely on Latu going and making a crazy play, or the Murphy twins. But they did bring back a Toia. They had to bring in pieces to make sure they had a defensive line that was viable. And they did lose a linebacking coach, right? Ken Norton Jr. no longer with UCLA. So a lot of changes up in front of the safeties, in front of the DBs, that can make a bigger difference as to why UCLA might be ranked so low. Remember, they don't have like the best pass rush and the best pass rusher in the nation anymore, and extra help to go along with it. It's not like it was a one-man wrecking crew. Felt like it at times, but an elite D-line. A solid linebacking crew, and I still think they can do some things, right? Medrano made some plays. You had Femi Oladejo coming in. So you still have talent in front, but the mixture of it isn't going to help bail out the secondary if they're going all-out pressure or getting a four-man press and getting pressure with 4 to 3 guys up front and allowing UCLA to sink more into coverage. That's not what they can do this year based on what the talent they're bringing in or they still have left over. Now, in years to come, it could definitely happen, but they're not probably bringing another Latu out of nowhere to serve this team justice and become a tackle for loss leader and a sack leader, and hopefully a UCLA Hall of Famer when it's all said and done after his 2 years he did at UCLA recovering from medical and everything. UCLA secondary, yes, it can be a source of concern, but so is a lot of this defense, a lot of question marks. Whether it's continuity, whether it's a new coach in the room, whether it's a new overall scheme from the defensive coordinator, there's so many things in different situations you're going to have to deal with. Now, remember, this isn't the Pac-12. They're not going to go up-tempo, throw the ball all around. Remember, Iowa has a new offensive coordinator. Iowa. Not sure that's going to mean much, but a lot of these teams are overrated offensively, or had been overrated. Still skillful, still making them going up and down. And remember, Jonathan Smith now over there with his young quarterback at Michigan State. So there's going to be interesting defenses. Not that UCLA is playing the Michigans or the Michigan States, or even Ohio States for that matter in this next year. That's why I think the defense could potentially surprise depending on what they play. Nebraska's got a freshman quarterback, a lot of new head coaches, a lot of new quarterbacks across the conference, especially what UCLA is playing this Big Ten schedule, gives me hope for optimism, despite a secondary that's played a lot, but may not have more than a couple percentage snaps together. So I do think it is a source of concern. I disagree that they're the worst secondary unit in the conference. That's 18, 20 teams deep. But there is concern. I can see them being in the bottom half of the conference, but they can make plays. Hopefully they can be ball hawks. Remember, sometimes they can be a poor secondary, but they can force turnovers and get the ball and turn the opposition over. You know, bend but don't break might have to be the motto of this year's team. Bend but don't break. Give up 3, force some interceptions. Remember, UCLA did a lot last couple of years, specifically last year, forcing fumbles. The emphasis was getting turnovers, a lot of fumbles, a lot of recovered fumbles, getting some key interceptions at certain parts in the field when teams are deep inside the 20 in the red zone. That's what the secondary has to be good at in order to be a serviceable unit as a whole. And I think this team can do so with a lot of guys who have played for a lot of years. Now that's the job for Cockaboy for the secondary room, everybody else. But remember, there will be a lot of fun and a lot of hair-pulling watching some of the UCLA moments this year in 24 football-wise when they go to LSU, who is replacing their quarterback, Heisman winner. Remember, Nebraska, freshman, Iowa, when have they had an offense? Even though they have a new offensive coordinator, they haven't had an offense in forever. Again and again and again. We'll find out. So that's going to wrap up this episode of Locked On UCLA. We'll come back, more basketball, more football, more new content, more stuff looking at new Big Ten opponents, all of that and more on Locked On UCLA to come up. But get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.